Hi everybody, Fintan here from Damson Cloud, and this week we have another interview for you on the Damson YouTube channel and podcast. And I'm interviewing today the CEO and founder of Hiver, which is a really interesting customer support tool that Damson Cloud actually resell as well. And Niraj Ranjan is the founder and CEO. And Hiver is a Gmail and G Suite based customer service product. And Niraj is an engineer and developer who studied electrical engineering and also started his career in VLSI industry, which Niraj, you're going to have to tell us about this because I had to look this up. He ended up building a product for G Suite, and he's going to tell us about all the kind of twists and turns that he's had along the way. So thanks for joining us today, Niraj.
Good speaking with you, Fintan. Let's get started.
So maybe before we kind of kick off, I kind of like to ask a couple of silly questions. So this actually comes from my son, and it's, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
So this is actually a complicated question. I've thought about it multiple times, right? The world hangs on a very thin, fine balance, and even the most benevolent superpowers can be extremely dangerous. So I'd like to have a silly, superpower. I'd never like to have to go through immigration in any country that I visit. I think that's going to be excellent.
Some sort of teleportation, maybe, that you could.
Maybe there's maybe there is a special window saying Niraj, right? And then I just zoom through any country,
I like that. I like that.
any country I visit, anytime.
Just a special window just for you, and you can just walk straight through. That would be handy. That would be handy. I assume that's what it's like for royalty.
Yeah. So maybe I want to be a part of royalty without all the strings, without all the strings attached.
I did an interview with Ian Nairn. I don't know if you know him from C Learning, a company in another Google partner in the UK. And his superpower that he wanted, which I think he already has, was unlimited optimism. And I thought that was the best answer that I had so far, because he's just one of those people that. He's just always enthusiastic and optimistic about things. And my last one for you on the silly kind of questions: what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago? So if you could send some advice 10 years back, what would it be?
This is not a silly one. This is actually be a serious one. I would tell myself to spend more time talking to customers. I think we all do that when we start our businesses, but running a business, as it starts to scale, as you start getting more customers, as you start your, dipping your fingers into multiple different things, one thing that, usually takes the first hit is your time with your customers. And I think we could have, built everything faster and iterated a lot faster if you're just talking more with customers, right? So I think, knowing that before and knowing that in advance when I was starting the business, might have been extremely useful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that you're saying like that we do that at the beginning of our businesses, and then we get busy with all of the stuff, whether it's building a product or whether it's, for ourselves doing deployments and migrations and things like that. Yeah. And you can lose touch with things very easily. Do you know what I mean? And it's important to come back and say, well, what is it that you want, Mr. Customer, or you need? Do you know what I mean? And we had an example recently where a customer went off and found a service that we actually provided elsewhere because they didn't know that we provided it. And we were like, how did this happen? And that's our fault. You can't blame anyone but yourself.
Absolutely.
That we hadn't told them that or kept them up to date with that. They're a very old customer. They've been with us a long, long time. So, but the people had changed. And so, and I think for yourselves, obviously, it's around the product and making sure that it's still solving the problem or a problem for a customer. So maybe before we kind of dive into things, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you kind of ended up in the IT. Were you always kind of a techie person? Was it something you got pulled into, or you were always heading that direction as a young person or a young child?
Yeah, as a young child, I was always interested in maths and the sciences, and And of course, I had other interests too. I loved art, and but I'm from a small town in India, and if you are from a small town in India and you are good in maths, you end up studying engineering. The world pushes you in
Right.
that direction. The universe con- the universe conspires to make you an engineer. That's how I look at it, right? I ended up going to one of the better engineering schools in India and did my BTech or Bachelor of Engineering in Electronics and Communications Engineering. And I started my career in a very different space. It had absolutely nothing to do with cloud. I was working for a great company called Mentor Graphics. In the computer aided design space. So what we did in that business was we built tools for people who build chips, right? So if you're looking to build a computer chip, you cannot actually design the entire thing by hand. You're going to need multiple tools to build it, to test it, to actually turn it into silicon and get into market, right? So the company that I worked for built multiple tools that entire chain, and I specifically worked building compilers in C and C++, for translating one kind of description to another kind of description, right? Which is, very different from what you would do, in the cloud business, even from a technical
Mm.
standpoint. That is not the kind of problems that is solved, right? And so that is where I started. And then one thing led to another. The problems that we solve with Hiver, uh, in many ways, the seed for the solutions that we use to solve those problems came out of the kind of email communication that we used to have in that business, right? So
Yeah.
we had email as our primary channel of communication,
Mm.
and I saw multiple problems with how we would use email and then how it could be done better, right? So although that
Mm.
was not cloud email, we used Outlook and Microsoft Exchange. But then when we started an email company, we ended up building on Google and G Suite because we thought that cloud is the way to take it forward. And
Yeah.
and if you want to build a business like this for anyone anywhere in the world, you have to take it through cloud.
Yeah.
Building it for Outlook and Microsoft would be taking a step back.
A step backwards. Yeah. And I think in the early days, we've been a Google partner for 10 years, and I know you guys have been around for a long time as well. Like Microsoft didn't have a cloud solution. Do you know what I mean? They had that other horrible thing, BPOS, for a while. Which thankfully died a death. But they didn't, really in the cloud space for email, it was Google. Like that was it. There wasn't really anything else. And so how did the idea for Hiver then came really when you were in that other business, or some beginnings of what would eventually become Hiver? So take us on that journey. How did it get from that idea of like email is could be done better to a place where you had this collaborative inbox customer solution product?
The specific problem that I faced when I was in that business was, we are a team of 25 to 30 people, split across three continents, and using email very heavily for our internal conversations.
Mm.
And then 6 months
Yeah.
down the line, new person would come in and ask the same question again, and then you'd be hunting for
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
email conversation or for that attachment that was in that email, which is in that person's inbox, right?
Yeah.
And my insight was that people are using email for collaboration all the time, but
Yeah.
email was not built for collaboration. It was built to be a simple
No.
point to point communication tool, right?
Mm.
And then how do we make email better at collaboration and for knowledge sharing, and so we had tons of different ideas of what we can do, and then
Sure.
everything filtered and condensed into what you see now through multiple iterations, right? So we started building a knowledge management product on top of email, and from there, out of understanding what people really need to solve their day-to-day problems, we ended up getting into the specific space of building a customer service solution. So multiple iterations over multiple years.
And can I ask, when did the business start? What year was it sort of founded, and how long did it take till you had like a product? Do you know what I mean? That you sort of were ready to like launch to the market.
Yeah, so we launched sometime in 2011, and or
Mm.
towards the end of 2011, and it was just me and my co-founder Nitesh, and both of us are
Sure.
engineers. I'm not a
Yeah.
very good one; he is an excellent one, but we managed to hack together a product pretty fast. I think we have
Mm.
been on the G Suite marketplace probably ever since 2012, the mid of 2012, and
Mm.
we always had customers. So the product was not as refined as what we have right now. It
Sure.
did not
Yeah.
it could not command the price that we command now, which is many times the
Mm.
price of a G Suite seat. but it sold, and it had some
Yeah.
customers, right? So we hacked together something in within an year, and then it grew from there.
Yeah, but
It was,
I think it's a good point that you make. Do you know what I mean? And Google are like this too. Find me a product that was, what it was when it started, 5 years, down the road. Do you know what I mean? It's like the whole point of cloud products is that constant update, that constant iteration. And I think Google are big on launch early and iterate. Do you know what I mean? Which can have its drawbacks as well, as we know as Google partners. But that idea that it's just constant improvement, we've all gotten used to that, whether it's our phones or whether it's software like Gmail or Facebook or whatever. As consumers, we're used to that idea now that we sort of pay a subscription and it improves. Do you know what I mean? Cool. And in terms of the sort of challenges that you guys had in those kind of early days of the product, what were you said you sort of managed to hack together or build a product fairly rapidly, but what were the sort of really big challenges for you as an entrepreneur, whether they were app or technical based or otherwise?
One serious problem that we have had till very recently was this constant, apprehension that email is going to die, and although and it's we laugh at it, right? People who are in the ecosystem, and we know what people
Sure,
actually
yeah.
use to collaborate, know that email is not going anywhere. But if you look back, 7 to 8 years back in the past, you would see multiple articles in TechCrunch about how Slack is going to
Yeah.
kill email, or Asana is going to kill email, right? And
Sure,
one
yeah,
reason
yeah,
that
yeah,
it took
yeah,
us so long was that it was
yeah.
extremely hard to raise money,
Mm.
and we had the ideas to do all of this stuff very early on, but getting the resources to do it quickly was extremely difficult. So I think one the biggest probably problem that we have faced, is this idea in people's head, which was very deep, that email is the death is imminent. It's going to come tomorrow, and and then we'll be left with no business to do, right? So
I know it's funny that I mean I'm the same. I had read articles over the years about that, and there was, yeah, certainly at a particular time there was a feeling that chat or chat based applications or project based applications would come along and in some way sort of kill it. And I certainly think chat based applications have reduced emails in companies, but like it's kind of like saying that the online shop is in somehow going to kill the post office or something, but like in actual fact, those types of things have become, we get different things in the post now, but it's actually delivery services, maybe, for want of a better description.
absolutely, it's a very very different purpose. I mean, email serves a very different purpose when you compare. We are ourselves very heavy users of Slack and multiple different
Yeah,
collaboration
yeah, yeah,
tools like
yeah.
Apple, right? But I mean, email serves a very different purpose. For example, we use Slack heavily, but Slack is very good at free, fast, free flowing communication, where we have
Yeah,
a single thread, and you have communication that's just flowing. But if you want more structure, if you want a subject, if you want responses with the subject, if
yeah,
you want communication to be asynchronous, I mean, I send an email to you
yeah,
today, and you
yeah,
send me a reply 2 days later. You
yeah.
cannot do that over a chat solution, right?
No,
And that
and
is what.
I that's an interesting point that you make about the synchronous and asynchronous collaboration. And I think it's something we discuss with customers, when we're talking about collaborative tools. And many collaborative tools and cloud-based tools push us towards more synchronous collaboration, like video calls and Google Docs instead of sending, and that makes sense. But it's interesting. I've been reading so much lately about remote working. We've been remote working, as I was saying to you earlier, for the last 10 years. But for a lot of large companies, having that time delay for collaboration is actually really important, because they've got people working across time zones. They've got people, if people are remote working and flexible working, they work at different times. Do you know what I mean? And so that sort of asynchronous collaboration is often important, where I don't need a response to this right now. Do you know what I mean? And that's okay. I'm just sending you an email, and whenever you have your free time, or you sit down to do your email, you respond to me, and that's okay. And we can, as you said, you can solve really big problems like that. So I think we will always need both forms of communication. As in the same way as I think that, like, in-person meetings are never going to die because of video calls. Do you know what I mean? I think they're both really important. Me and you can communicate with each other and do this interview, and we're thousands of miles apart. You know, that wouldn't be possible, you know, maybe 20 years ago. And we, you know, it would be very difficult, particularly at the moment, to be in person. And so, like, that's wonderful. But there are other times when it's really important to get your team or be with your customer in the same room. And obviously, yeah, difficult at the moment, but in general, you know. Any other challenges that you guys kind of came across? And I'm as an interesting follow-up to that, I'm also interested in what advice you would give maybe to other people who are looking to raise funding, particularly maybe in a space where people don't quite believe it's going to be the next big thing. Do you know what I mean? And where you have those kind of challenges that you're saying, where investors have been sold a particular idea. You know, it's interesting to think how you got around that. Sorry.
To some extent, you know, you can tweak it and hack it and, you know, state the problem in terms that they understand or relate to. You know, another thing that works very well is, you know, citing examples. So if you can find other companies like yourselves, which, you know, are similar to some extent in terms of technology or business, you know, problem that they go after, and have either raised money or have been successful in the recent past, right? So I think, you know, what works in adverse situations like this, you know, is framing the problem in terms that they understand. Citing examples, I think they are ideas that usually work where, you know, there is a lot of apprehension about what you're doing, right? That's about it, right? Other than that, you have to stick to your guns and, you know, you have to do what you have to do. So.
You have to believe in what you're selling, and and what about other challenges for yourselves? Were they the kind of major ones, or was there any other?
So, you know, I mean, technical challenges around building on Google, and not Google, but Gmail on the browser are, you know, I mean, they're of course very specific to us. But if you're looking to build on a third-party tool, I mean, if you're going to be, you know, a guest on someone else's platform, you have to, you know, be prepared to deal with the idiosyncrasies of that platform, right? So that is one thing. And, you know, I think more and more companies are going to face that, because I think, you know, tons of tools are going to be built on tools that are pervasive, like, you know, Salesforce or Google, etc. Because, you know, they're not tools anymore; they're platforms, and businesses are going to be built on those platforms, right? So I think, you know, I mean, all entrepreneurs need to get used to this idea of building or, you know, dealing with other parties, and you know, hacking their way and, you know, finding their way out, you know, out in the, you know, through the difficulties and idiosyncrasies, right? I think that is one important learning that I've had.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point that you make. Do you know what I mean? That, like, people need to get used to this idea that, like, you're a platform. You know, you're not necessarily just an app, and you can't live in a silo. Do you know what I mean? You need to accept the idea that other people will need to integrate with your tool and your product, and that's okay. I got an email recently about 2 third-party apps that we work with, like yourselves, asking could you introduce me to so and so, because we want to integrate with their product, you know. And so there are 2 other Google tools who both integrate with Google, now want to integrate with each other, you know, which is great. And that's people thinking in that platform way, rather than we're siloed and I'm over here and you're over there, you know, which I think is pretty cool.